Struggling to get your photos to look just right? Today I'll try to cut through the noise and share some simple, effective editing tips to help you achieve the results you're looking for. Ever notice how what you see with your eyes doesn't always translate from the camera to the screen? Well, editing is the key to bridging that gap. It's the secret to transforming your shots from flat and lifeless to professional-looking images. I'm Alvin Turner, and today we'll cover some of the basics like adjusting exposure, tweaking colors, and sharpening details. Trust me, it's easier than it sounds, so let's dive in and get your photos looking the way they deserve to. Before we lay out any tips or techniques, it's important to identify some of the common challenges that beginners face. Challenges that can make the editing process seem intimidating and hinder your progress if not properly addressed. One of the most common challenges that beginners face when editing photos is dealing with lighting issues. Whether it's an underexposed shot that looks too dark or an overexposed shot that looks too bright, getting the exposure right can be a struggle, which in turn can lead to frustration when you're trying to correct it in post. And alongside lighting issues, color correction is another hurdle we face. Often, the colors in photos don't quite match what we see in real life, and this is usually due to problems like color cast or using the wrong white balance, which can make images look too warm or too cold. And without experience, fixing your photos to look natural and appealing can be tricky. Another challenge is too much noise or grain in your shots. Noise can make a photo look gritty and reduce the overall quality, and beginners often struggle with how to reduce noise without removing all the details. Now, these are just a few of the hurdles that some of us encounter when we're first starting out. So coming up next, we'll go over some tips and techniques to help you overcome these challenges and enhance your editing skills. Now, if you're like I was, when it came to editing pictures, I had no idea where to begin. Other than knowing that the shot has to be in focus or that it can't be too dark, because of the fact that photography is a subjective art form open to interpretation, sometimes it's hard to know what's wrong or what's right. But if you stick with me, we'll walk through a straightforward, step-by-step workflow, a workflow that will help you overcome some of the challenges you face and hopefully bring your images closer to the professional look that you're aiming for. Now, I'll be using Adobe Lightroom, but even if you're using something different, the same editing principles apply. Step 1 is fixing the exposure, and we'll start by expanding the basic section, which is located in the right panel, and use the exposure slider to either brighten or darken your image, but keep an eye on the histogram to make sure you're not losing details in the highlights or shadows. Now, the histogram is a graph that shows the brightness levels in your image from shadows on the left to highlights on the right. If the graph is bunched up on the left, then more than likely your image is underexposed. If it's bunched up on the right, then it's likely overexposed. Now, although it's important to keep the graph from clipping on either the right or left, which would mean losing details in the shadows or highlights, you don't need a perfectly centered histogram for a good image. Ultimately, you have the freedom to adjust the exposure to fit your artistic vision, be it dark and moody or bright and cheerful, it's your call. Take a moment to pause the video and try adjusting the exposure on one of your own photos. See how the histogram changes and find a balance that suits your style. Once you're ready, hit play and we'll move on to white balance. The white balance tool is essential for getting accurate colors in your photos. It adjusts the color temperature and tint to make sure that whites appear truly white, balancing the overall color tones. If your image looks too warm, it means that it has a yellow or orange tint. If it looks too cool, it has a blue tint. Start by adjusting the temperature slider. Moving it to the left makes the image cooler, adding blue tones, while moving it to the right makes it warmer, adding yellow tones. Next, adjust the tint slider. Moving it to the left adds green tones, and moving it to the right adds magenta tones. Adjusting the tint slider can help remove unwanted color tints from your image like a green or magenta cast. The goal is to make the colors look natural and true to life. You can also set the white balance using the white balance selector tool, sometimes called the eyedropper tool. Click on the selector and then click on a neutral gray or white area in your photo. Lightroom will automatically adjust the temperature and tint to balance the colors. Take a moment to pause the video and try adjusting the white balance on one of your photos. Move the temperature and tint sliders or use the white balance selector to see how they change the color tones. Aim for a balance that makes your image look natural and true to life. When you're ready, hit play and we'll continue. Now let's refine highlights and shadows. We'll revisit the histogram and use the clipping buttons this time to help us see if any areas are too bright or too dark. First, let's take a look at the highlight slider. Click on the right clipping button on the histogram. This will highlight any clipped areas in red, indicating that those parts of the image are too bright and they've lost detail. Adjust the highlight slider until the red highlights are either minimized or gone, making sure that you retain detail in the bright parts of your image. Now let's move to the shadow slider. Click the left clipping button on the histogram. This will highlight any clipped areas in blue, indicating that those parts of the image are too dark and they've lost detail. Adjust the shadow slider until the blue highlights are minimized or gone, making sure that you retain detail in the dark parts of your image. Using the clipping buttons on the histogram, you can make precise adjustments to the highlights and shadow slider, making sure that your photos retain detail in both the brightest and darkest areas. This helps maintain a balanced and detailed image. Go ahead and pause the video, try using the clipping buttons and adjusting the highlights and shadows, and see how it helps you keep the important details in both the bright and dark areas. Once you're ready, hit play and we'll move on. The contrast slider affects the difference between the darkest and lightest parts of your image. Moving it to the right increases contrast, which makes the dark areas darker and the light areas lighter. This creates a stronger difference between shadows and highlights, making details pop and giving your image a more dynamic and vibrant look. It's like adding more depth and making the image come alive. On the other hand, moving the slider to the left decreases contrast. This makes everything look more similar, turning dark areas into grays and light areas into lighter grays. It can make the image appear flat and less interesting, almost like it's washed out. Now, someone might ask, what's the right level of contrast to add? Well, the right level of contrast depends on your specific image and artistic intent. The key is to experiment with the contrast slider and find a balance that enhances your photo to better align with your vision. Take a moment to pause the video and try adjusting the contrast on one of your photos. Move the slider to see how it changes the look of your image. Notice how increasing contrast makes details pop and decreasing it makes them flatter. Find a balance that works for your style. When you're ready, hit play and we'll continue. Alright, let's talk about the Vibrance slider. Vibrance bumps up the intensity of the more muted colors in your image while keeping the already vibrant colors from going overboard. You can think of muted colors as the less intense parts of your image, like a soft pink compared to a bright red. The Vibrance slider helps those softer colors stand out without making the already bright colors, like reds, too intense. Slide it to the right to boost those subtle colors and make your image look more lively without going overboard. Next up is the saturation slider. Saturation cranks up the intensity of all the colors in your image equally. This can make your image look more vivid, but you have to be careful because if you push it too far, you'll get colors that look exaggerated and unrealistic. So start with small adjustments and find the sweet spot where your photo looks vibrant but still natural. So here's a tip. Start with the Vibrance slider first to bring out those softer colors, then fine-tune the color intensity with the saturation slider. This way, you get a balanced and pleasing color enhancement. The goal is to make your colors look vibrant and true to life, not fake. By carefully adjusting the vibrance and saturation, you can enhance the colors in your photos, making them more dynamic and appealing while maintaining a natural look. It's all about subtlety and balance. Now, go ahead and pause the video, try adjusting the vibrance and saturation sliders on one of your photos, and see how boosting softer colors first and then tweaking the overall saturation gives you a balanced look. Once you're ready, hit play and we'll move on. Now let's sharpen your image to bring out the details. Scroll down to the details section on the right panel. This is where we'll make your image look crisp and clear. First up is the amount slider. This one controls how much sharpening is applied overall. Start with a moderate increase and adjust as needed. Too much sharpening can create artifacts, so find a balance that makes your details stand out without looking too harsh. Now let's use the radius slider to control the width of the sharpening effect. A lower radius focuses the sharpening on fine details, while a higher radius affects larger edges. For most photos, keeping the radius between 0.5 and 1.5 works well. Adjust the slider and see how it impacts the clarity of fine textures in your image. Now let's adjust the detail slider to emphasize fine textures. This slider works together with the radius slider to define how much detail is enhanced. Moving it to the right will bring out more texture, but be careful not to over sharpen because it can make your image look grainy or noisy. Finally, let's use the masking slider to apply sharpening selectively. Hold down the Option key, Alt key on PC, while dragging the masking slider. This shows a preview where white areas indicate where sharpening is applied and black areas show where it's not. By masking, you can focus sharpening on the edges and leave smoother areas like skies or skin untouched. This technique helps maintain a natural look while enhancing details where it matters most. By carefully adjusting the sliders, you can sharpen your image effectively and make it look crisp and detailed without creating artifacts. Now pause the video and try sharpening one of your photos. Play around with the amount, radius, detail, and masking sliders to see how they affect the sharpness and clarity. When you're ready, hit play and we'll move on. Now let's tackle noise reduction, which is especially important for photos taken in low light conditions. Noise can make your images look grainy or speckled, but Lightroom offers tools to help reduce this and improve the overall quality of your photos. First, head over to the details section where you'll find the noise reduction sliders. The two main sliders we'll focus on are luminance and color. Start with the luminance slider. This slider reduces the graininess or luminance noise in your image, which is often more pronounced in photos taken at high ISO settings or in low light. Increase the luminance slider gradually and watch how it smooths out the grain, but be careful not to overdo it because too much can make your image look too soft and lose detail. Next, use the color slider to address color noise. Color noise appears as random colored specks in your image, usually in the darker areas. Increasing the color slider helps to remove these unwanted color artifacts. As with luminous noise, increase the slider gradually and find a balance that reduces the color noise without making the image look unnatural. By carefully balancing these sliders, you can effectively reduce noise while maintaining the sharpness and detail in your photos. It's all about finding the right combination that cleans up your image without sacrificing too much quality. With these adjustments, you'll notice a significant improvement in the clarity and overall quality of your photos, especially those taken in challenging lighting conditions. The goal is to achieve a cleaner, smoother look without losing the fine details that makes your images stand out. By following these steps, you'll address common challenges and elevate your photos to a professional standard. Practice these techniques on a regular to develop your own unique editing style, and remember, it's all about making small adjustments and finding out what works best for your photos. We've covered a lot today, from adjusting exposure and contrast to refining white balance and reducing noise. Each of these steps can dramatically transform your photos, making them look more professional and polished. The key is to practice and experiment with these tools to find out what works best for your style and vision. If you found this video helpful, hit the like button and subscribe for more photography tips and tutorials. Share your thoughts or any questions in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Keep practicing and you'll see how these editing techniques can really elevate your photos.